And hello again. Welcome back to Brian Keene's Secret Histories, a series in which I, Brian Keene, talk about each of my books in chronological order, meaning the order that they were published. And I reminisce. I tell you what went into them. I tell you if I like them or not. I tell you if writing that book was a good experience, a bad experience, what it did for my career, what I think about it all these years later. In our last video, we talked about the resurrection and the life. And before that, we had talked about earthworm gods, city of the dead, the rising, terminal, etc. What you need to know is at this point in my career, I guess the phrase is accurate. My star is starting to rise. I'm getting to test myself a little bit more. I'm now making steady money. I'm just about to go full-time as a writer. I haven't yet. I haven't with this book. But I will after this book actually is published. The book is, of course, Take the Long Way Home. There are several editions. First, we will look at the signed limited edition. This was my first book with Necessary Evil Press. And they did gorgeous, gorgeous books. I miss them. I wish they were still around. This was 2006, by the way. Now, I see my first book with Necessary Evil Press. What was happening at this point in my career is I was starting to become super productive. 2006, 2007, 2008 would be my most productive years. And they were when I had the most stuff published. Problem with that was, with Leisure Books, my paperback publisher, I was, in a contract for 2 books a year. If they had done more than that, it would have taken slots away from other writers, and I didn't want that to happen. B, I wasn't quite there yet. Dick Lehman, I think at the time, was the only one who had 4 books a year coming out from them. I don't think my sales were quite there yet, but, I was getting popular. I had all these other books written. Delirium couldn't handle publishing them all, so I started working with other small press publishers and indie publishers, and Necessary Evil was one of those. And they were, again, a great company. A guy, I don't know if I'm allowed to say his name or not on these, so I'll just say, if you're watching this, dude, man, we miss you. You were a good dude. So this was the limited edition, cover art by Caniglia. This was the lettered edition, metal tray case, 3D on here, and if you open it up, you got something very cool. If you bought the lettered edition, you got 1 page from the original manuscript signed by me, and a print by Caniglia, signed by him. And there, of course, is the book itself, very similar to that edition. We're going to talk about the writing of this book in a moment, but while we're looking at the versions, once I got all my rights back, this was an early one from Deadite Press. At that point, when this was published, I was reaching my 2nd generation of readers. The people who had grown up reading me were still reading me, but now younger people were starting to read me, and those younger people were Deadite Press's bread and butter. And Deadite Press played to them with the covers. I remember my older fans just enraged over this cover and some of the other covers. They thought it did the material in the book a disservice. I like the cover. I mean, Deadite Press was an extreme horror publisher, and this is not an extreme horror book. It's mainstream horror. So the cover is a little too much for the story, but it's a fine cover. I like it. There's only ever been 1 foreign edition of this, and that was a German mass market paperback. So let's talk about the writing of the book itself, because I find that pretty interesting. I grew up in a religious household. My parents were Methodists. My extended family, my maternal grandparents were Presbyterians. Um, Aunts and uncles and cousins on my father's side were everything from Southern Baptist to snake handling, faith healing Southern Baptist. Um, and then you had my paternal grandfather, who he was a bit like me. He figured there was something out there, but it was folly for humankind to try to say what that thing was. Um, but yeah, grew up in a religious setting. We went to church every Sunday. I was involved with the church youth group. Um, and I had a lot of fun. I'm not going to sit here and say it was miserable. It wasn't. I had fun. I wasn't particularly religious. I didn't believe what I was being told every Sunday. Uh, I believed that some of it probably happened, but I had a lot of questions that nobody could answer for me. But I did have fun. My friends all went to that church. My childhood sweetheart went to that church, and there are fond memories when I look back on it. The one thing that always fascinated me from the time I was a kid was the book of Revelation and the Rapture. Now, the Rapture is not something that actually appears in the Bible. And yet it's this huge thing, in certain sects of the Christian religion. The rise of the Antichrist and the rapture and all of that, it always fascinated me. I loved the Omen movies as a kid, Damien, of course, the Antichrist and his rise to power. I remember when the third movie, The Final Conflict, came out, I was so pissed off that it didn't show the rapture, because, that's a crucial part of that whole mythology. But just the idea that, in the blink of an eye, people would disappear. I always found that terrifying. And of course, as a kid, my maternal grandmother would terrify me with it. She'd tell me about all the babies that were going to disappear from their incubators, and all the pilots on the planes that were going to disappear, and the planes were going to crash. And, for young Brian, who was already a horror fiend, that shit was bread and butter. So I knew that sooner or later I wanted to tackle that. I wanted to write a secular version of the Rapture. Now, at the time, there were some very popular books by LaHaye and Jenkins. They were called the Left Behind series. This was my answer to the Left Behind series, because Left Behind series, it's popular fiction. It's accessible to anybody, but it definitely proselytizes. It's written by Christians for Christians. I wanted to do the same thing, but without the proselytizing. I wanted to be accessible to everybody. What would the rapture look like to those left behind? That was the story I wanted to tell. A lot of people on the internet joked at the time, because one of LaHaye and Jenkins' books in that series was called The Rising. Now, this was long after my own novel had been published. So, everybody accused them of ripping off my title. For the record, I don't think they ripped off my title. And even if they did, titles can't be copyrighted anyway. You can only trademark a title. So I wasn't upset about that at all. I have nothing against LaHaye and Jenkins. I just wanted to do my version of the Rapture. It was something that had fascinated me since childhood. As I said, at this point, I was starting to obtain more power, more privilege. I could write about what I wanted to write about. I didn't have to keep writing zombie novels. I was, hesitant to go back to crime, even though I had an idea for another crime novel called Kill Whitey, which we will get to soon. And I didn't want to go back to crime because of what had happened with Terminal. But, I'd written two very successful zombie novels, The Rising and City of the Dead, both on the bestseller list. I followed those up with, a novel about giant earthworms and an elderly protagonist and Cthulhu in Baltimore, and that sold very well. Um, you know, I could get away with more. My limited edition stuff was doing very well, so I went with this. I'm very proud of this one. I'm trying to think how to do this without tooting my horn. As I said, I wanted a secular novel about the rapture. And I realized it was an opportunity for me to use characters that you don't often see a lot of in horror fiction. Um, I wanted a Jewish character. I wanted a gay character, etc. Now, we did see them in horror fiction, but seldom was it a straight guy, white guy writing about them, and even more seldom was it a popular straight white guy writing about them. I realized that this was an opportunity for me to do that very consciously, and that was why I picked the characters that I picked. I'm very proud of how this book turned out, though. A lot of people ask me, well, why did you end it the way you did? Why don't you continue the story? Well, for me, the story itself is right there in the title, Take the Long Way Home. The story is about, that first day after the rapture. And this guy who all he wants to do is get home to his wife and see if she's still there. After that, for me, the story ends. I mean, sure, we could, if you go by the Christian mythology, there's all kinds of things that happen after the rapture. There's the tribulation and the rise of the Antichrist, and, Armageddon, all that. But I wasn't interested in writing about that. I wanted this small, self-contained story about these three guys trying to get home, in particular the one character who just wanted to find out if his wife was still there or not. And once I'd done that, I didn't see anywhere else to go with it. Folks have asked if I'm ever going to do a sequel. No, I'm not going to do a sequel, but as I'm recording this video, which is February of 2025, I am currently working on the manuscript for Falling Angels, the Labyrinth Book 4. And spoiler alert, one of the characters goes to this world, this timeline, this continuity during the middle of this novella. So you will see a return to this world, but it is not a sequel. So I hope that excites you. I hope that you're enjoying these videos. I'm enjoying recording them for you, and I enjoy reading your comments on them. Hang on, I heard something. It sounds like pipes. Like a pan flute, maybe? You know what that means. Hylenius is coming in the next Secret Histories. It's the rutting season, and we're going to Dark Hollow. Peace.